James Mercer Langston Hughes was born February 1st, 1902 in Joplin, Missouri. His parents separated when he was young, which led to his father moving away to Mexico. Hughes lived a very poor and isolated life as a child. He lived with his grandmother, Mary Langston, while his mom attempted to find work. As a child, his grandma would tell him stories about slavery and the struggle abolitionists faced. She engraved these ruthless stories in his mind. She wanted him to understand the fight for freedom. Mrs. Langston planned for him to be a strong and independent man, yet still be humble and kind.
Langston's grandfather, Charles Langston, was a big supporter of John Brown, who was a radical abolitionist. His grandparents inspired him to be very down-to-earth and accepting of all people. In his later years, Langston wrote a poem about John Brown in the hopes of keeping his legacy alive. He wanted the Black Americans who were now free to be thankful for this courageous man. In 1912, when Langston was only 13 years old, his grandma died, which led to Langston to find comfort in literature.
Question time! What was the name of Langston's grandfather?
He then went to live with his mom and her husband in Lincoln, Illinois. His poetic influences came from Carl Sandburg and Walt Whitman. Throughout high school, Langston would submit his poetry to the school's newspaper, which became a regular job and one that he adored. Most of the literary magazines that he submitted his works to rejected him. Langston moved in with his father, James Nathaniel Hughes, after his high school graduation. However, Langston and his father did not get along because his father did not have pride in being Black, which Langston strongly disagreed with. Question time. What did Langston's grandma want him to understand? Hughes' poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, was written when he was passing the Mississippi River, thinking of all the colored people who were sold alongside of it. Over time, his poem was finally published in a magazine known as The Crisis. This was his first step into the amazing world of writing. When Hughes returned to America in 1924, he got a job as a busboy at a hotel restaurant in Washington, D.C. From there, he met an American poet named Vachel Lindsay. When Hughes realized that he was staying at the hotel, he brought Lindsay some of his poems to read. Lindsay was so moved by Langston's work that he decided to help Langston get recognition by giving his poems more publicity. Hughes won first place in Opportunity magazine for his poem titled The Weary Blues in 1925. A year later, The Weary Blues became his first book to be published, which held a collection of poetries. With his career rising, he had to ignore the critics who hated his work, especially because he was a colored man. Langston found a love for Harlem. He believed he truly belonged there and felt right at home.
It's time for another question. What job did Langston get when he returned to America? Back to Harlem. Harlem was thirsty for arts and literature, and Langston Hughes was there to help. With the help of two American writers, Wallace Thurman and Zora Hertzen, Langston was able to publish a literary magazine entitled Fire. This magazine encouraged Black writers to submit and embrace their ethnicity. Langston wanted all the colored people to come together in unity and prove themselves. This was the time period of the Harlem Renaissance, also known as the New Negro Movement, which was a popular artistic period that took place in the middle of the 1930s. This type of poetry was called jazz poetry. He was one of the earliest innovators to contribute to this type of poetry. Here's another question. What poet helped Langston get recognition for his poems? After attending Lincoln University, Langston received his bachelor's degree. Short after writing his semi-autobiography book called Not Without Laughter, his fans were very impressed and it became a sensation. It won the Harlem Gold Medal for Literature. Question time. Name one of Langston's poetic influences.
Many called Langston Hughes the leader of the Harlem Renaissance. In 1951, he wrote the poem Harlem. This poem is a major theme of the struggle within the American dream for African Americans. It became the city of Harlem's anthem.
You've reached your last question. What was the name of the magazine in which Langston received first place for his poem, The Weary Blues? Langston wrote over 70 literary pieces in his lifetime, which included books, plays, and poems. The NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, gave him the Spingarn Medal for his contributions to the Black community. Langston Hughes died on May 22, 1967, at the age of 65 from prostate cancer.